Chapter 1. I agreed to do Mauricio's podcast a month ago and almost forgot about it until he texted me last night. Mauricio had a decent-sized audience of listeners, mostly Southsiders. This was perfect, because in a couple of weeks I'd be making my big club debut at the famous Southside club, the Funny Box, and I was pumped. My ride driver dropped me off in front of Mauricio's house. I stretched my legs and yawned a great yawn. It occurred to me in that moment that I hadn't gotten a lot of sleep this week. That was the grind. Sleep wasn't allowed. Too much to do. Too much getting after it to get. I listen to lots of podcasts and fitness influencers who condemn those who get sleep as lazy pussies. I don't know. Sleep is nice every once in a while. I walked around back to where the studio was. Mauricio's assistant producer, James, came out to meet me. I was a little early. He took me into the living room to wait. We sat in the living room together. We didn't have much to say to each other. I didn't mind the silence. It was nice. I did make some dumb joke about us both being named James. I immediately regretted it, as if two guys named James never met face to face before. He politely laughed at my dumb joke. He was a nice enough kid, kind of a wimpy looking dude. He offered me a hit of the bowl he was packing. I declined. I didn't want to get stoned before the podcast and potentially end up making an idiot of myself. Also, I had work after this. I listened closely to the muffled talking coming from the studio, trying to figure out who Mauricio's guest was. The voice sounded familiar, and then I heard that loud, uniquely obnoxious howl of a laugh. Frickin' Tito. That son of a... Tito had performed on the last 3 shows I was booked on. I love Tito, but I was seeing too much of this dude for crying out loud. Look, I'm happy for the guy that he's busy and getting booked and all. I truly am. No shade. But my main issue was, and this might sound petty, but I gotta say it, because it's the truth. My main issue was that we looked too damn alike to be around each other this much. It bugged me. And Tito wasn't even Sefairian for crying out loud. He certainly did have the olive skin tone and curly dark hair to fit the bill. He even had light hazel eyes like mine with gray flecks. I resented this, mostly because I feel like the first 5 years of my 20s were spent cultivating a certain look. My look. The time and effort I put into separating myself from my similarly featured, olive-skinned, curly-haired countrymen would be for nothing if all it ever amounted to was that I would be told I looked like a pre-Coke Tito. To hear this was devastating, on a couple of different levels. Tito was a hard act to follow. That man was all energy. I wasn't nervous to go in right after him, but I wasn't totally not nervous either. I didn't want Mauricio to think I was a bore on his podcast, especially after having a madman like Tito tell Coke stories for 2 hours. This wasn't new for me. I've had to follow Tito more than a few times now. I've done it successfully, but he certainly has never made it easy for me. Today would be no different. James, the assistant producer, had a basketball jersey on. The number was 22. That brought me a little solace, some peace. I wouldn't say I'm a particularly superstitious kind of guy, but repeating numbers, especially 22, stood out to me as this wink from the universe or something. Since I started comedy, I would always see repeating numbers. It was almost like the moment I started doing comedy was the moment I had set foot down my correct life path. The universe was just affirming that fact. I was 18 when I started getting into all of that numerology stuff. If I was being honest, that's really what kept me going. Especially during those tough early years. The memories still haunt me in my bones of those first 6 months of open mics as a 19-year-old. I was awful. Objectively. I would just eat it at an open mic, probably for the 11th night in a row, and then have to drive an hour and a half home to my mommy's house. I'm talking 90 minutes of actively fighting the urge to drive into the opposite lane at 80 miles an hour. Those were the worst nights. Most nights, I just felt like I should quit and become a welder or something. Something useful to society with a clear career path. But anytime I would ask the universe to show me a sign if I should keep going with comedy, without fail, there would be a damn 22, 222, or 2222 show up somewhere. I know that sounds like girl brain logic, but it was the truth. Whether it be gas prices, streets, house numbers, taxi numbers, billboards, or whatever, you could set your clock by it. And when I saw those 22s, I'd take it as my affirmation to keep going, even through the suck. And now, 5 years later, my little comedy hobby, as my mom would call it, was actually starting to look like a real comedy career. My schedule was always filled with comedy stuff. I was being asked to do podcasts all the time. I was regularly getting booked on high-level independent comedy shows all around the city. I just got back from the West Coast doing some comedy out there and being paid for it. Not enough money to quit my day job, but I was coming out in the green more and more often. Things were looking up. Well, look at this. We got James Pretty Boy Chatfeld in the building, Tito exclaimed as he walked out of the studio with Mauricio, the explosion of pure, exciting, spontaneous energy that he was. What's up, bro? I said. I dapped him up and hugged him. He always smelled like he'd just had a crazy adventure the previous night and hadn't made it to a shower yet, so a few spritzes of cologne would have to do. I really did love this beautiful, coked-up Madrain bastard. We really didn't look that much alike now that I was looking at him, considering his neck and arm tattoos, his long curly afro that he sometimes wore in a ponytail, the bandana he wore around his neck with all of his gold chains, and the fingerless driving gloves he wore all the time. If anything, the two of us standing next to each other looked like before and after pictures. Now who was the before and who was the after depended on who you asked. Are you going to be at Gino's tonight? Tito asked me. Probably. How about you? You already know, baby. Alright, bro. I'll see you there, I said, dapping him one last time. Sorry to keep you waiting, Mauricio apologized. We went a little over time. Are you ready to rock? He asked me. It's all good, man. Let's do it. Get him, James, Tito encouraged, with a couple of finger guns fired my way, as he walked off with Wimpy James to smoke the blunt I watched him roll in the waiting room after killing his bowl. The mics were already on as we got seated in the studio, which helped us get into a good flow of conversation immediately. Say what you will about Mauricio as a comedian, he was a hell of a podcast host. And so yeah, Feldman has pretty much been my motherfucking dog ever since, I was finishing up saying. Oh shit, I covered my mouth. Am I allowed to cuss on here? My bad. I don't want to mess up your ad revenue or whatever. Mauricio shook his head disapprovingly. Unbelievable. You unprofessional, green, son of a... You know the only people who listen to my podcast are observant Sefairians, right? I laughed out loud when he said that. Oh yeah, is that right? Yeah, that's right, buddy. Now, if I can take a second, I want to apologize to all of my virgin-eared, never cussed in their lives observant Sefairian listeners on behalf of James Potty-Mouth Chatfeld over here. We were both chuckling. But for real, bro, I know for every fuck, damn, or shit that comes flying out of the mouth of me or one of my guests, there's gonna be some listener out there who clutches their pearls and gets offended. The truth of the matter is, life isn't always as whitewashed as they want it to be. Sometimes, real people and real stories come with a fuck here or a damn there. So I can cuss? Yeah, dude. This is a comedy podcast. You saw I literally had Tito on. You think I'm gonna tell him to dial it down? We both laughed. Okay, fair enough, I said as I raised my hands in surrender. Okay, so speaking of real life and observant Sefairians, this is actually a great transition into something I wanted to ask you about. So something I found out about you that I thought was really interesting was that you were raised observant. I guess I knew you were Sefairian, but like, you were very religious growing up. Like an observant Sefairian and shit. I laughed out loud when he said that. Wow, you did your research, my guy. How the hell did you find that out? I laughed. It's that podcaster magic, baby, he joked. I have dirt on everyone in the comedy scene. So for all the comics out there listening, don't mess with me. I can torture your ass real quick. We both laughed. Alright, respect. Yeah, man. My mom and dad are both observant Sefairians and raised us kids in the faith or whatever. That's cool, bro. Yeah, I see you all with the little yarmulkes and white scarves and the suits. It kind of looks like fun. Yeah, try being observant for 17 years and then get back to me on how fun it is. Dang, 17, huh? Now, I know there's like a spectrum with the shit, obviously. So like, were you super religious? I heard some observant Sefairian men aren't even allowed to look at a woman or some crazy shit like that. Yeah, we were never quite that bad, I chuckled. We definitely were observant. Like, we ate kosher, we went to Sefairian schools, we learned how to read and write ancient Sefairian, we did the whole church every week thing, the rabbis forced us to memorize and recite scripture, the whole nine. Damn, dude. Yeah, it was fucked. I laughed. I guess I could imagine a cute little James with a yarmulke on his head. Mommy, can I get another gefilte fish? We laughed. He continued. Are you still, observant at all these days? Practicing, or whatever you say? I laughed out loud. Have you seen my act? What do you think? We both laughed immediately. Mauricio thought it was super interesting to ask me questions about Sefairianism as a religion for the next 20 minutes. That was 20 minutes longer than I wanted to. He didn't know this, but it was kind of a sore topic for me. Only Sefairians could really understand how deep the beef runs between observant and secular Sefairians. To a religious Sefairian, we secular types were pretty low on the totem pole. 2 steps below a stray dog, 1 step above a heretic. My dad pretty much stopped talking to me completely after I left the church. That's why I really don't go home much these days. I talk to my mom and my sister as much as I can, but I'm pretty busy, especially these days. As for my dad, I haven't had a conversation longer than a few words with him since I was 17. It's whatever. I don't mind talking about it. Mauricio's curiosity made sense. It's not like he had many opportunities to have this conversation, being a Gentile and all. That's what made him a great podcast host. He was a genuinely curious dude.